In the final days of April 1945, Berlin was no longer a city, it was a graveyard. Buildings smoldered, streets were buried beneath rubble and bodies. Soviet artillery thundered closer with every hour. Beneath the ruins of the Reich Chancellery, deep underground, a man sat hunched in a concrete bunker, trembling, broken, and defeated. Just 12 years earlier, millions had hailed him as Germany's savior. Now there was no cheering crowd, no empire, no future. When Soviet soldiers finally reached the bunker, they discovered burned remains, charred fragments of bone and flesh hastily buried in a shell crater. The body belonged to Adolf Hitler, the man who had unleashed the deadliest war in human history, overseen the systematic murder of 6 million Jews, and driven his own nation into total destruction. Yet this ending raises a disturbing question. How did the world's most notorious tyrant begin life as an obscure Austrian child? How did a rejected artist and homeless drifter rise to command absolute loyalty from millions? And how did an entire society, modern, educated, and cultured, follow him into catastrophe? This is not a story of destiny. It is a story of failure, resentment, trauma, and opportunity, colliding at the worst possible moment in history. To understand Adolf Hitler is not to excuse him. It is to understand how something like this can happen again. Adolf Hitler was born on April 20, 1889, in Braunau am Inn, a small border town in Austria-Hungary. His father, Alois Hitler, was a rigid customs official, obsessed with discipline, authority, and social status. Alois had risen from humble beginnings and carried deep insecurities about legitimacy, which he imposed harshly on his household. His mother, Clara Hitler, was gentle, deeply religious, and fiercely protective of her son, having lost several children before Adolf survived infancy. This emotional contradiction, fear of his father, and adoration from his mother, shaped Hitler's personality. The family moved frequently due to Alois's work, preventing Adolf from forming stable friendships or roots. At school, he was an average student at best, often defiant, disengaged, and resentful of authority. He admired teachers who glorified German nationalism and dismissed Austria's diversity as weakness. These ideas gave him both identity and scapegoats, and he began to see himself as part of a greater German destiny. Conflict with his father intensified as Alois demanded Adolf pursue a stable career in civil service. Adolf claimed he wanted to be an artist, though he lacked both discipline and formal training. Their arguments were often explosive, occasionally violent. When Alois died suddenly in 1903, Adolf abandoned school entirely. His mother indulged his fantasies, shielding him from responsibility. In 1907, Hitler moved to Vienna, convinced he was destined for artistic success. He applied to the Academy of Fine Arts and was rejected for lacking talent in human figures. He applied again the following year and was rejected again. That same year, his mother, Clara, died of breast cancer. Devastated and orphaned, Hitler descended into poverty. He lived in men's shelters, sold crude postcards to survive, and wandered Vienna's streets, a young man adrift with no purpose. Rather than confront his inadequacies, Hitler absorbed the city's virulent anti-Semitic and nationalist propaganda. Political demagogues blamed Jews, Marxists, and modern culture for Austria's decline. These ideas gave him both identity and scapegoats, and he began to see himself as part of a greater German destiny. When World War I erupted in 1914, Hitler eagerly enlisted in the German army, seeing the war as a redemption. He served as a frontline messenger, showing reckless bravery and strict obedience. For the first time, he belonged to something larger than himself. He earned the Iron Cross for bravery, a distinction he cherished deeply. The war's hierarchy, discipline, and camaraderie offered him a sense of identity he had never known. Yet Germany's defeat in 1918 shattered him. Hospitalized after a gas attack, Hitler learned of the armistice and collapsed into despair and rage. He embraced the conspiracy theory that Germany had not been defeated militarily but betrayed by internal enemies, Jews, socialists, and politicians. This myth would become the emotional foundation of Nazism. The collapse of Germany in 1918 destroyed the world Hitler believed in. The Kaiser abdicated, the empire vanished, and a fragile democracy, the Weimar Republic, was born amid humiliation. For millions of Germans, defeat felt incomprehensible. For Hitler, it was unbearable. Germany after the war was drowning in chaos. Hyperinflation erased life savings overnight. Veterans begged on score corners. Political militias fought openly. Communists, monarchists, and nationalists battled for control. In this environment, anger became currency, and Hitler learned to wield it. Assigned by the army to observe extremist political groups, he attended meetings not as a believer, but as a spy. One meeting changed everything. At a gathering of the German Workers' Party in Munich, Hitler challenged a speaker and launched into an impassioned tirade. The room fell silent. Party leaders recognized something rare, a man who could articulate rage in a way that made others feel understood. He joined the party, soon dominated it, and renamed it the National Socialist German Workers' Party, the Nazi Party. Hitler positioned himself as its unquestioned leader. Hitler's genius was not administration or strategy, but emotional manipulation. He understood humiliation, resentment, and fear because he had lived them. His speeches offered simple explanations for complex problems. Germany was not weak, it was betrayed. The economy was not broken, it was sabotaged. The nation did not need compromise, it needed purification. Jews became the central enemy, blamed for both capitalism and communism, an impossible contradiction that mattered little to desperate audiences. The Nazi movement became theatrical. Uniforms, banners, music, and ritual transformed political rallies into emotional experiences. Violence was encouraged. The SA, or brown shirts, intimidated opponents and disrupted rival meetings. Democracy weakened as fear spread. In 1923, believing the moment was ripe, Hitler attempted to seize power in Bavaria, the beer hall push. The coup failed disastrously. Police killed 16 Nazis, and Hitler was arrested. Yet failure became an opportunity. At his trial, he used the courtroom as a stage, portraying himself as a patriot willing to die for Germany. Judges sympathetic to nationalism sentenced him to a lenient prison term. In prison at Landsberg, Hitler dictated Mein Kampf, a rambling manifesto outlining racial struggle, the weakness of democracy, the supposed threat of Jews, and the necessity of expansion eastward, Lebensraum. Most importantly, it demanded absolute leadership, a single will above all else. Upon release, Hitler abandoned violent revolution in favor of legal conquest. The Great Depression of 1929 devastated Germany. Unemployment soared, hunger returned, and faith in democracy collapsed. Hitler promised jobs, pride, and national revival. By 1932, the Nazis were the largest party in the Reichstag. In January 1933, conservative elites appointed Hitler chancellor, believing they could control him. They were catastrophically wrong. Within weeks, the Reichstag fire was used to suspend civil liberties. Political opponents were arrested en masse. Concentration camps were established, not yet for extermination, but to terrorize. By 1934, Hitler had eliminated all internal threats. During the Night of the Long Knives, he ordered the murder of SA leaders and rivals. The army swore loyalty to him personally. When President Hindenburg died, Hitler merged the roles of chancellor and president. Germany became a dictatorship. The Nazi state reshaped every aspect of life. Education became indoctrination. Art became propaganda. Science served ideology. Women were reduced to motherhood. Youth were trained for obedience and war. Jews were excluded, humiliated, and dehumanized step by step. Each measure normalized cruelty. The Nuremberg Laws of 1935 stripped Jews of citizenship. Mixed marriages were outlawed. Careers were destroyed. In 1938, Kristallnacht shattered any remaining illusion. Synagogues burned, businesses destroyed, and thousands arrested. The violence was public, organized, deliberate. Abroad, Hitler tested the world's resolve. He remilitarized the Rhineland, annexed Austria, and dismantled Czechoslovakia. Each time, Western powers protested but retreated. Appeasement convinced Hitler that risk brought reward. On September 1, 1939, Germany invaded Poland. World War II began. Blitzkrieg tactics overwhelmed enemies. Europe fell with terrifying speed. Yet conquest was only half the plan. Racial policy followed armies. Jews were herded into ghettos. Mass shootings became routine. In 1941, Hitler launched Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of the Soviet Union. The largest military operation in history became an ideological war of annihilation. Millions of Soviet prisoners were starved. Entire Jewish communities were wiped out. The final solution became industrialized murder. Death camps like Auschwitz, Treblinka, and Sobibor processed victims with horrifying efficiency. Trains delivered victims, gas chambers replaced bullets, bureaucracy replaced emotion. Hitler grew increasingly detached from reality. He dismissed generals, refused retreats, and issued impossible orders. Stalingrad became his obsession. When the city fell in 1943, Germany's fate was sealed. From then on, defeat followed defeat. Allied bombers destroyed cities, millions died, yet the killing continued. Even in defeat, Hitler prioritized annihilation over survival. By 1945, Berlin was encircled. Hitler ruled from his underground bunker, issuing commands to imaginary armies. He blamed everyone but himself. He married Eva Braun and dictated a final testament filled with hatred. On April 30, 1945, Adolf Hitler ended his life. His body was burned as artillery shells fell overhead. Germany surrendered days later. Over 60 million were dead. 6 million Jews were murdered. Hitler's legacy is not only destruction, but a warning. He did not arise alone. Millions enabled him. The Third Reich promised 1,000 years and lasted 12. What remains is the lesson humanity must never forget. This must never happen again. Hitler's story is not only about one man, but about how failure, hatred, and mass fear can reshape the world. His history must be told, not to glorify, but to understand, because understanding is the only defense against repetition. If you want to uncover more hidden truths from history, see the forces that shaped our world, and learn the lessons that time refuses to forget, like, subscribe, and keep watching the Historia Unlocked. Because history doesn't just repeat itself, it warns, it teaches, and it challenges us to see beyond the headlines.